Hi boys and girls, this is lesson 1.6, Guide to Solving Number Stories. Please write this and today's date in your notebook. When you're ready, come on back. So we're going to read this math message, and we want to be ready to answer two things. What do we already know, and what does the problem want us to find out? So here's what the math message says. It's the world's tallest buildings. Oh, and you can find this in your math journal on page 13. So you could have that open right now, as well as your notebook. So the world's tallest buildings, math message. Terrell is a competitive stair climber. He competes by climbing stairs as fast as he can. This year, he wants to climb 400 stories. The Burj Khalifa in the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, is the world's tallest building with 163 stories. The Petronas Towers, the tallest building in Malaysia, has 88 stories. The Zifeng Tower in China has 89 stories. If Terrell climbs these three buildings, how many more stories will he need to climb to reach his goal of 400? Okay, so of that we want to know, what do we already know, and what does the problem want us to find out? Jot those two answers down in your notebook, and when you're ready, go on to the next slide. So, what do we already know? We already know the total number of stories in each building, and we also know the total number he wants to climb. Hopefully you had that as well. Maybe not in my exact words, and that's perfectly fine, but those are the two things you already do know. And then what does the story want us to find out? Well, we're trying to answer how many more stories Terrell wants to climb to reach his goal. So how many more stories will he need to climb? That's what we want to find out. Let's take a look before we try and solve that at another page in your SRB. And this is the guide to solving number stories. So it says solving number stories is a big part of mathematics. You should know that already. Good problem solvers often follow a few simple steps every time they solve a number story. When you are solving a number story, you can follow these steps in any order. First thing, make sense of the problem. Read the problem. What do you understand? What do you know? What do you need to find out? So you see we've already done that step. Then we need to make a plan. What will we do? Which of these methods are we going to do? Are we going to do some diagramming, draw pictures? Take a look at all those options of things that you might be able to do to solve it. The next page says then go on to solve your problem. And to solve your problem, make sure you show your work. Keep trying if you get stuck. Use some grit. Reread the problem as an idea to help you move forward. Think about strategies you've already tried and try new strategies. And then make sure you write your answer with the units. And then at the end, check. Does your answer make sense? How do you know? Okay, you can refer to that page 26 in your SRB as many times as you would like. It's there for you. All right, so let's go back to this problem. So again, the math message is telling us about Terrell, this competitive stair climber. And right now we want to figure out the number of stories that Terrell needs to climb. So how could we find that out? So I'm thinking we would want to know the total number of stories that he has already climbed and then find the difference. So the difference between that and the 400 that he's wanting to do, right? Okay, so what's the first thing that we should do? I'm thinking the first thing we want to do is combine the number of stories that we know he's already done. So there's a lot of different ways you could do that. Think about what ones you might choose to get yourself set up for that. So one thing I want to make sure that you keep in mind is that you could always write yourself a number model, and then we can use letters for the unknown quantities. So if we're looking to do that for this particular problem, here's what I'm thinking we would do. So we're going to add the 163 plus, I'm getting that from right here, plus the 88 stories, plus the 89 stories, And then the unknown quantity is what is the total of that. So let's call that S for stories. But we could use any letter that we would like as far as that goes. So if we solve this problem, are we done? I hope you would say, no, we didn't actually solve our total problem, because what we really want to find out is how many more he needs to go to get to that goal of 400. But this is our first step. Let's look at the next slide for the next one. So once we know that, the next thing we want to know is what is our actual answer to our problem. And we could write ourselves a different number story for that. So 400 minus the number of stories in the 3 buildings, which is what we are going to solve first, is equal to, again, we can just pick another letter as our unknown quantity. So that's a variable letter for our unknown quantity. So the first thing I'm always going to do when I'm trying to solve a problem like this is I want an estimate for myself so that I can feel confident when I'm done in my answer. So when I look at this, here's how I did my estimate. So for the 163, I said 150 was a good estimate for that. That's a close to estimate, right? But I can work with 150 in my mind pretty well. And then for the 88 and the 89, I said 100 for each of those. So when I add that together, which I can do quickly in my head, that's 350. Then I'm taking the 400, which is the goal, and I'm subtracting the 350 and ending up with 50. So in my estimate, I'm saying Terrell has 50 more stories to climb. All right, so right now you want to try to solve for the exact answer. So this is our estimate, and you can write that in on page 13 in yours. The estimate, we would say then, would be 50 stories. Now you need to really solve it. If you are having difficulty with that, you could go to the next screen where I'm going to review a strategy that you learned in 3rd grade. So this is a review of partial sums. If you don't recall exactly how to add multi-digit numbers, partial sums you learned last year. We'll be learning some other strategies this year, but we're going to review this one right now. So for partial sums, you remember you add all of the hundreds together. So I wrote this vertically. I'm adding the hundreds, so it's 100, and then there aren't any other hundreds there. So that's a total of 100. Then I'm adding the tens, and you can see in the tens we've got 60, 80, and 80. When I add those together, 8 and 8 is 16 plus 6 is 22, so it's 220. And then I'm adding the ones, 3, 8, and 9. And I add those together, and that's 20, because I would do 9 plus 8 is 17 plus 3 is 20. When I add just these things right here together, adding down my columns, I'm going to get 340 for my total answer. That's a review of partial sums. If you did another addition method, that's perfectly fine as well, as long as you ended up with 340 when you got to the end. So then we're going to take that information and we're going to plug it into solving our problem. So 400, which is how many he wants to climb, minus 340 equals 60. So remember, the last step in the guide to solving number stories was to check, is my answer reasonable? So I estimated 50. My actual answer is 60. So yes, my answer is definitely reasonable. It's actually quite close. So I hope you understand how I did those steps. Review this video if you need to. Your job is going to be just to do problems 2 and 3 in your math journal. Give problems 2 and 3 a chance. Try and get them done. Go back and use all these references as much as you need to. Then we're going to talk about it in class, and we'll work on page 14 together. So these are 2 and 3, which are the other 2 problems on page 13 in your math journal. Try and get those done. If you get those done really quickly and want to go on to 14, you know you're welcome to. But we'll be doing those together in class as well. All right, have a good night.